Hey everyone, welcome to Movie Marathons HQ, where we do movie marathons connected to new releases and where we enjoy and review some of our favorite movies. This video is part of the Avengers Doomsday Movie Marathon, where we are watching one movie every week as we prepare for the release of Avengers Doomsday in December 2026, less than a year from now. Today we are discussing X-Men: The Last Stand, released in 2006 and directed by Brett Ratner. This is the final movie in this X-Men original trilogy. It's not the last time we'll see these characters, as we do see many of them reprise their roles in X-Men Days of Future Past, and we do see new actors take over these roles in the prequel trilogy, quadrilogy I guess, that we've already reviewed as part of this movie marathon. But yeah, this is the culmination of the original trilogy of X-Men movies. Overall, I don't dislike this movie, which I guess means that I like it, but it certainly is a step down from the previous two X-Men movies. For positives, I would mention the performance of Famke Janssen and also a comic book nerd favorite moment for Iceman. But then for negatives, I would mention the plot being overstuffed, the death of certain characters, and it wouldn't be an X-Men review without me complaining about the lack of continuity. Spoiler alert for X-Men: The Last Stand, as we will go into plot points in the positives and negatives. So for positives, I would mention the performance of Famke Janssen. So she has been our Jean Grey for all three of these movies. And at the end of X2, X-Men United, her character is seemingly killed by a big crushing wall of water, but they had been teasing this fire behind her eyes and something else going on with her. In this movie, it turns out she didn't die. They go and find her unconscious at Alkali Lake. And, well, before that, she manifests herself to Scott Summers. And then we find her again at Alkali Lake, and then she's kind of brought back to life. They classify her as a Class 5 mutant, as if that means anything or has meant anything, but I guess that just means she's strong, but it is weird. But her performance is pretty good. They kind of classify her as like a split personality thing. She almost has this second personality that they call the Phoenix Force. And so Famke Janssen flips back and forth between them, and it's pretty effective. It's a little bit reductive in, oh, now I'm a good person with good morals, and now I'm the bad guy, and who knows what I'm going to do. I'm chaotic, and I'm crazy, and then I go back to being Jean Grey. It's a little bit one note, but she does a pretty effective job at switching between the two, and I think this is the best she has been. She's given by far the most to do in this movie, but I think her performance is actually really good in this one. And then another positive in this movie is just a comic book moment that comic book fans would love and appreciate. I mentioned in a previous review that Iceman, Bobby Drake, played by Shawn Ashmore, has some really cool things to do in X2 specifically. And in this movie, he gets an amazing moment when he and Pyro face off. So we have an ice guy and a fire guy. And as they're blasting their elements at each other, not Johnny, that's the other guy. John is Pyro. But Bobby finally makes himself into ice. In the comics, he zips around on little ice chutes that he makes, and his body is fully made out of ice. And they hadn't done that in the movies yet. So this movie, he finally gets his moment to turn completely into ice, and it looks really, really great. And so that's just a comic book nerd moment that I remember really liking when I saw this movie in theaters, and I cheered to finally see Iceman as the ice guy. Now for negatives, the plot of this movie is overstuffed. Everybody has said that, but they tried to combine two important storylines from the comics into this one movie, and it negatively impacted both. They had the concept of a mutant cure being created and used from the DNA of a mutant called Leech in the comics. And that's a huge plot. But then they also have the Dark Phoenix storyline. And so by doing them both, they did them both a disservice. And in the movie, they try to make it make sense why they're both happening at the same time. But for me, it's just too overstuffed. I think they could have allowed more time to breathe if they focused on one of those two, or diminished one and elevated the other. But it seemed like they were both given equal time and equal focus, and it just ended up being really muddled. So the plot's very overstuffed in this one. Another negative is that there are far too many character deaths. I know it's called X-Men: The Last Stand. So it seems like the stakes are high enough that some characters should die. But just the way that these characters die or are taken out of the story just feels super unfulfilling. So this is the spoiler alert, but we get the death of Cyclops, who gets obliterated by Jean Grey, and poor Scott Summers, portrayed by James Marsden, he was just never given anything to do in all three of these movies. He's quite almost literally sidelined in all three. So that character death is unfulfilling because we never got to see him do anything cool. We also have the death of Xavier, who gets atomized by Jean Grey, and that's a cool scene, but it just it didn't feel very emotional when he dies. It seems scary that Jean Grey is serious, but I don't know. There's just a missing emotion there. And then there's some other deaths, but also some other characters whose powers get taken away. So Mystique gets hit by this cure dart, and she loses her powers. And then at the end of the movie, they inject Magneto with the cure darts, and so he loses his magnetism powers, which is pretty weird, except at the end of the movie in the little post-credits, he is able to control metal again, so I guess it doesn't matter if you're strong enough. It just always feels really unfulfilling on these character deaths. I'm not a screenwriter, so I don't know if they could have done that better, but it still ends up being a negative because at the end of this movie I go, well, I'm not really interested in seeing the next chapter of this story because of the specific characters they killed off and how they did it. And then Jean Grey dies at the end because Wolverine has to kill her. I do kind of like how that works. It made it seem like he was the only one who could do it. But yeah, it's just an unfulfilling lot of character deaths. And a final negative, and I think the final time I can complain about this in an X-Men movie, although we do still have 2 Wolverine movies coming up, the lack of continuity. So these movie producers of this X-Men series just must not care about continuity. They just care about the movie they're making. So in this one, we see an origin to a young Charles Xavier and a young Eric Langtry going to meet Jean Grey with her parents at her home. I know that chronologically this was the first time we saw that, but then in future movies we see a different origin for Jean Grey, so you get 2 origins that are different. They're sort of connected and similar, but they're just different. And then there's a part where when Mystique loses her powers because of the cure dart, Magneto turns his back on her. And if you've seen the prequels of how these two have known each other since the 60s, which also doesn't make sense given their ages, but if they've known each other that long, for him to just turn his back on her is insane. He does it pretty candidly and easily. So there's just a lot of continuity issues there. I get it that they don't care about their continuity. It just frustrates me as a fan of this series. Now, how might X-Men The Last Stand connect to Avengers Doomsday? Well, we do have several of the actors and characters in this movie that will return. Hank McCoy was introduced, played by Kelsey Grammer, and he is confirmed to return in Doomsday, so we'll finally see him back. We also saw a CGI Beast in the post-credit scene of The Marvels, and that was reportedly voiced by Kelsey Grammer, so whether it's that character that we still see in Doomsday or a different version of Beast, we'll see. Patrick Stewart will be coming back as Charles Xavier, Ian McKellen as Eric Lehnsherr, James Marsden as Scott Summers, and Rebecca Romaine as Raven. They're all coming back. Juggernaut was also introduced in this movie, played by Vinnie Jones, and the character comes back in Deadpool 2 as a different version of Juggernaut. And also sort of this version of Juggernaut by a different actor shows up in Deadpool and Wolverine. So there's some connections there. So that's my review of X-Men The Last Stand. What do you think of this movie and how do you think it might connect to Avengers Doomsday? Make sure to let me know in the comments below. Also, now that we've seen this X-Men original trilogy, I think I would rank them as X-Men is my favorite one, X2, X-Men United is the next best one. There's an argument that that one is better, but for me, I just think I like the first one a little bit more. And then X-Men The Last Stand is in 3rd place. So it's not terrible, but the other ones are certainly a higher quality. Follow Movie Marathons HQ on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, and also on Letterboxd, where you can see all of the movie marathons we've done and are currently doing. See you at the movies!